We're really happy to be here today because we would like to share with you a story that started here at Intersection last year. So you might recognize yourself on this picture. It has been taken at the end of last year's conference in Prague. And a few minutes after this picture, we all went for a drink. And I shared a beer with Tomomi. We were discussing about what we learned during this conference, and we were very excited. And I shared with her a project my agency just won, this Eurotunnel project. And by the end of our drink, we decided to form the team together because we were feeling that it was a really great case for an enterprise design project. So the project was about define and roll out the first setup of customer experience standard for Eurotunnel, but we'll get back to that later. We'll explain everything about that. First, I'd like to introduce ourselves. So my name is Mael Inizan. I'm design director at Hiveworks, a design consultancy with both offices in Paris and in London.
And my name is Tomomi Sasaki. I'm a designer and partner at AQ, an independent design consultancy in Tokyo and Paris. I'm also a longtime collaborator of EDA.
So some of you may not know about Eurotunnel. So Eurotunnel is a company that operates the Channel Tunnel. It's a tunnel under the sea, bridging France and UK. You have two kinds of trains in this tunnel. You have the Eurostar one, who are going straight to London, but that's a different company, and they're paying to use the tunnel. And you have the Eurostar one, the shuttle, for cars and for truck. So the experience is quite similar to the one you could have if you went to an airport, but the main difference here is that you're traveling with your car. So you would book a ticket, you would go through check-in, wait a little bit in a terminal, and then you would board the train with your car. And 35 minutes after that, you reach the other side, and you can continue your journey. Eurotunnel is not really a big company. They have a little bit more than 3,000 employees on both sides of the channel. A significant part of those employees are contractors joining for summers and for holidays where there are some peak activities. They have around 20 million passengers a year. So if you do the math, it's around 60,000 a day. Most of them are coming from UK to visit the country or to work in France. But it's also interesting to know that it's a significant part of the trades between Europe and UK. There is something like 1.6 million trucks that goes through the tunnel every year, and it's 25% of trade between United Kingdom and Europe.
So I will explain the brief a little bit. So the business context is that Eurotunnel opened about 25 years ago. They just had a wonderful anniversary. It also means that the trains and kind of the infrastructure around it, the tunnel itself, is aging quite a bit. And of course, all of the IT systems that go with it. So there are delays in the trains, which of course makes for quite big queues. And when they get quite severe, this was from last summer, like it'll hit the national news. And so this is something that they're patching it, they make do, and it's still totally fine. But occasionally there are these delays that they have to deal with. And of course, there is the uncertainty of Brexit coming up. As Mael mentioned, it's a big part of they manage the border control, or they are part of kind of the border control journey, and so there are tons and tons of trucks going through these two checkpoints, and they don't have any control over the procedures that the countries and governments decide to do, and we don't know how Brexit is going to happen, and so that was kind of the business environment that they were in. And with any customer experience initiative nowadays, of course, customers today are very well informed. They expect certain things of services. They want to be informed about what's going on. They have a voice, etc. And so that was kind of the environment that we were working in. So they are investing in upgrading the infrastructure. But of course, that's a big investment. It'll take time for people using the service to actually notice that impact. And so top management decided that in parallel to these investments, they would work on more of the human interactions and so make significant improvements in the customer experience. So that's kind of how the initiative that we worked on is positioned. For those of you who are familiar with the enterprise design stack, so the brief is big picture. Of course, it's an experience initiative, and the ask was to render it as standards in the form of some kind of book or an app, and that was kind of the gap that we were asked to fill. And to do that, we would need to look at all parts, all aspects within the anatomy layer, look at who the actors are, where are they in the touch points, literally touch points in this case because it's a train, what are the services they're delivering based on what little bits of information. And so that was most of the modeling that we did across these 4 aspects. So what we worked on, our project was called SimplyBetter, is to map the customer journey from both UK and France to UK, which are slightly different, and established standards for the customer experience across all of the touch points per the different modes of service delivery. So how it should look like when there are no delays, and then various degrees of delay. And we set up KPI frameworks for each of these touch points on how it should look like and how it can be measured. And then we worked on kind of the narrative of CX, fundamentals of customer service, and the lexicon for how to talk to the customers. And these kind of underpin all of the stuff above. So if I go back, so what we delivered first and foremost is a mobile app that all of the employees at Eurotunnel have access to. It's in French and English. We made a ton of video and image content as well, and they can update the content anytime they want. We also rolled out training for the frontline staff with our training partner, CXB Hub. And so the project designed all the planning and the material. Basically, it's taking people off the shifts that they work on to operate the tunnel, put them in a classroom, walk them through the content, and practice some of the interactions. And we took a train-the-trainer approach, which we'll talk about later. There are about 1,500 frontline employees, and the plan is for them all to take the training. I think we're around 1,000 at the moment. And then kind of vaguely, all of the changes needed to bring this to life. That was part of the brief. We didn't know what would be needed to bring it to life. And so the things we ended up working on, again, were the framework, the service mode scale, and a big internal communications plan. And so if I go back to the stack, we used mostly the people and function frames and actually worked on all aspects within the design space. So from an enterprise design project standpoint, this was, like, for me, I think for both of us, the most full breadth project that we did. And we think that it's partly why it was successful, like we covered all of the aspects. So it's only been a few months since we delivered the standards. They managed the busy summer season, but I'd like to share one observable impact. And Martin was talking earlier today about Philips deciding to put the customer at the center of everything that they do. So the training had a really good response from the staff, and so they got a rating of 4.6 out of 5, so that's kind of bottom up. And what's really interesting is that top management, it was kind of a wake-up call for them, and they decided that all future training from now on, which is quite technical, right? There are a lot of train parts in the training rooms. Most of the training that they do internally is very operational and, for safety regulations and things like that. But they decided that all future trainings will include a customer experience component from now on, which we think is like a brilliant rendering, of the intent to install that customer-centric mindset. So the Eurotunnel has really historical significance and also strategic with all of the trade. And we have made a lot of tunnel jokes within the duration of this project, but we will use the metaphor of bridges. For our talk, we will talk about 3 bridges to introduce what we learned from this project, because it's really the bridge between the UK and continental Europe. Also, there are only so many things you can carry the tunnel metaphor. All right, so customer experience, the most important bridge is between, of course, customer and Eurotunnel, but we can't work on this directly. And so what happened was they set up a project team from all parts of the organization, and then we were called in as consultants to help them. So the first bridge that we'll talk about is the one between our team and the project team. Second one is our team and kind of the bigger enterprise, so Eurotunnel's huge organization. And third is the project team and their company. How do we take what we did within our project and scale it to the rest of the organization? So Mael will take the first one.
Yeah. And go back. So yeah, the first bridge, the one that connects us to our client team. And there's something we all know and we all have experience that you need to take care about who are your clients. But sometimes we tend to jump right away into the project and put aside some of these social factors. So we feel it's really important to open this talk with this part. So meet the client team. So it was an 8-person team from all over the company, mostly from communication, operations, customer relations, and customer experience. It was a binational team from people from both sides of the channel. And it was actually one of the objectives of the project, like you told, to unify the experience between France and UK. And it was a really experienced team. Half of the project team had more than 25 years of experience at Eurotunnel. So that means that they joined the company before the tunnel gets finished. So that means that they build their life here. They know everyone. They get invited to party with their colleagues, etc., etc. So it took a lot of courage from them to join this project because they all had very comfortable position. It was easy for them to stay in this position, and they decided to join. And it was scary because if you think about that, so they had to find their place in this new team, breaking silo and hierarchy. They had to work in English. For the French guy, it was quite difficult to stay focused for hours and hours of workshops. They had very strong deadline with a strong exposure in front of the management and their colleague as well. And for them, it was definitely some jump into the unknown because at the beginning of the project, the objective was not totally clear, and how we were going to deliver and what we are going to deliver actually was not clear at all. And all they had in front of them to tackle the challenge was a bunch of consultants they just met. It was us. And it took some time to build the bridge with them. At first, they were calling us the consultants. And at the end of the first workshop, we could hear something like, who is taking back the consultants to the train? And then after a few more workshops, we were making some progress. They could see that we were listening to them, and we were giving them some direction, and we were building something together. We became Hiveworks, and then Mael and Tomomi. And the way we built ourselves, our team, was quite important as well to show that we were taking some step in that direction. There was the fact that we had both languages in the team, to have a French and an English speaker. We had the same gender split that they had. It was a half team, half women, half men. And as well in terms of skills, because it was really unclear, so we had to make sure that we have the right set of skills to adapt it to improvise during the project. And we'd like to share a really good example for us about that, which was definitely a turning point for the project.
Mm-hmm. So when we, one that we think represents really well, where we were able to build on the confidence between the two teams is, so this is a photo from an early workshop. What we see, and maybe the designers in the room, when you see this, when we've been working on content strategy, we've been working on the information architecture of a digital service. If you see like personas and user stories and sample content coming out, we start to see the app, like what it's going to look like. And sometimes we forget that that's probably not the case for most people. They see stickies. And so at the end of the first day in a 2-day workshop, like we could tell people were getting really stressed. Like, where are we going with this? What's going to happen? And they were comfortable, going with the activities, but it was really starting to get quite tense in the room. And so what we decided that night was to just kill the agenda of the second day, take a few hours after dinner to build a prototype of what we know the app is going to look like, and then the next day tell them that we're going to change the plan. This is a prototype built on, like Keynote. And you could tell the tension in the room go down, like just drop immediately. And this is when they really started to see that all of the hard work they were putting in kind of on top of their regular workload was going to become something, a tool that people could use. And they really started to take ownership of what we were building together. I think they were really happy to see that we were able to respond to what they were living through and were comfortable making a change. Like this kind of threw our project schedule out of whack because we brought up the prototyping a few weeks. And we were so excited. Oh, show the prototype. It's in Keynote. Yeah, it was so exciting to see kind of some kind of vision, something tangible around that vision that our project lead decided, like we were ready to go show the CEO. So we actually cleaned up a few things, made different versions of what it would look like now and in the future, and went to talk to the CEO, and that brought us quite a bit of air cover for the next couple of months. But we wouldn't have been able to do that if, like that bridge hadn't been made, and we were uncomfortable kind of crossing it because, we were drifting apart. So that's the first bridge.
Yeah, the second bridge is the one that connects us to the rest of the company. It's about getting to understand their cultures and mindsets and their operation in order to define what needs to be designed to set up those standards. So, as we said at the beginning, there are a lot of constraints when you run such a company. So they have more than 20 million people coming to this tunnel each year. And they have to respect some railway regulation, of course, some custom regulation because it's a bridge between two countries, some counter-terrorism measures. So that's a huge set of security measures all along the way of the customer journey. And it has led to a very operational mindset for them, of course, and we can understand it. This is a quote we kept hearing during our research phase. We are the best version of ourselves when managing a crisis. And that's something we heard it from the CEO himself and from some people on the ground. And so it's deeply rooted in the culture, the shining in action. They're really good when it comes to provide some quick fixes, when it comes to do anything you need to do to make the train running. But the question we had to face here is that to design some standard, you have to take a step back and look at the whole picture. So we have to change this part of the mindset. And another quote we kept hearing was something like that. Sometimes we are looking at the car and not the people inside it. And as you can see, they were sometimes forgetting that there were some customers around the car. And the other question was how to manage to put back the customer at the center of everything you do. So what did we do actually? We went into the field like every other designers, and that's something we were actually sharing between both cultures, because they wanted us to go and to see by ourselves what it was about. And we were quite lucky because we were able to see many types of situations, from really smooth and sunny day where everything is perfect to real degraded situation with hours and hours of delay when a train gets stuck into the tunnel. So we could see how people were coming to ask a lot of questions, getting angrier and angrier, and how the staff was trying to manage it. After this part of the field, we did a lot of interviews with the staff at all levels of the hierarchy, from the main stakeholders to the ground people. And the question with that was, okay, no. And yeah, to sum up, what we had at the end of this part was a good view about who were the actors, what was the company culture, what was the organization, what was the customer archetype, and what was the full user journey. Next phase is how to get sense of the data, and we used two tools that we designers will know. First one was some persona to align the team about who were the customers. So we synthesized with a few archetypes, and for all of these archetypes, we made sure to highlight answer to these two critical questions for us. Why did they choose Eurotunnel? And what are the levers we could use when the situation is degraded? Then we mapped out the entire journey using a blueprint. So at the top, you have the step of the user journey. And for each of the steps, what is the actual experience of the customer? What are we asking them to do? And how they feel about it? And at the bottom, the pink post-it are what's happening in the background, who is involved to do what, at what point, with what kind of tools, etc., etc. And doing this mapping, we identified 3 big levers to build up the standards. The first one was about common language. So I mentioned a couple of times the degraded word, and that was a word they kept using every time. And they were referring to 2 kinds of situations. The first situation was normal situation. It's really clear. Everything is running perfectly according to the plan. And the other one is a degraded situation. And it's gets a little bit confusing because degraded situation could refer to a slight delay of a train for a few minutes. It will be quickly absorbed, or for something much more serious that could cause hours and hours of delay. I mean, if I'm working in the customer-facing position, I will have some customer coming to UC and to ask some question, looking for information. But the team are spread across a very vast territory, and information gets lost very, very easily. And if I'm a manager, I might have to redeploy my team, but I need to coordinate with the rest of the company. And to do that, we need to be sure that we're talking about the same thing and that we have a common language to describe a specific situation. So that's what the scale is about. The scale is just a common language. We define 4 modes of operation, from green to black. And green, of course, is when everything is okay, and black, it gets a little bit more complicated. And we made sure that the objective was to make sure that everyone was referring about the same thing. When we were talking about red mode, everyone should know what is it about. And of course, there were already some indicators within the company. That's not something totally new. But the problem with the indicators we had is that they were not global indicators to get a big picture about a specific situation. And those indicators were very operational, technical, very hard to understand, and not framed from the customer perspective. So what we did about that was to frame it to the customer perspective and make it available through an app. And for each of those modes, we made sure to describe the customer state of mind. What does he feel in this kind of situation? What are the type of questions he's asking himself? What will you see on the field? If you're going into the field in black mode, what does it look like? And what is the action plan? As a team, what do we need to do in order to go back from black to red and to et cetera, et cetera. So that was the first level. The second level was to define the target journey. So we were quite surprised during our research to learn that some staff members had never taken the train. And most of them are assigned to one specific area, and it was sometimes really unclear for them what was happening before their touchpoint and what was happening after the touchpoint. And all they had to describe this was a list of a little bit more than 30 touchpoints, very technical. Some of those were optional, so it was really difficult to get the big picture here. And most importantly, it was not saying anything about what Eurotunnel is aiming to deliver. So what we did here was to define the target journey. And for this target journey, we made a simple set of 6 steps to map out the entire journey, to make it really easy to understand. And for each of those steps, we define what is the customer looking for, what is his state of mind for when he's entering this step of the journey, and what Eurotunnel is aiming to deliver. And the last part was about how to establish KPI from the customer point of view. So it's about customer experience KPI framework. So we defined the simple set of 4 types of KPI. So functional performance, visibility of efforts, communication, and access to comfort. And those simple set is covering the entire journey. It will be slightly adapted depending on the mode you are in. And what we did was to frame it from a customer point of view. Because if I'm giving you an example, delay will happen, and customer understand it. And when we did our research, we had some code like that. They understand that it can happen. But what they don't understand is not having any information about what's going on. So we could have some KPI about time to fix a train. and that's definitely important, but that's still very operational. So the kind of KPI we wanted to have on communication, for example, was about being up to date on how Eurotunnel is solving the situation. On visibility of effort, it could be, we need to show the customer that we're doing something right now to solve the situation. It could be, for example, to open an emergency help desk, to put more people on the ground, and stuff like that. Third bridge.
So the third bridge, and I think this is where most types of initiatives fail, right? You do the stuff in your project, and it somehow doesn't plant itself in the rest of the organization. And I know I've done projects that kind of end there as well. I don't think we've cracked that nut completely, and there's no like one right answer. They just have to do a lot of things. So I'm going to introduce a couple of the initiatives that we did a bit sequentially to bridge that gap. So first one is that since we didn't really know what the end would be, we didn't know who the team should look like. And so as we were discovering things very early in the project, we discovered capabilities and kind of domain expertise that did not exist in the project team. And so it kind of kept getting bigger and bigger as the project progressed. As from a workshop facilitator point of view, this is a little bit stressful because each time you walk into a workshop, there's like a new person and you're not sure who they are and why they're there. And so one of the things we had to learn very quickly was to be able to onboard them to the project, make them feel comfortable that they, like we want them to be here, like we all want them to be here, and still be able to run the work that we needed to happen within that day or two. Second is that we say in Lean Startup that if you're not embarrassed about your prototype, it's probably too late, right? And so we took that on board as well. As we were working on the journeys and the prototype of the app, we did a series of workshops with the staff who are not related to this project as a way to introduce them to what SimplyBetter was trying to do. We also needed help to finalize the journey because it's so complicated and everyone has their own view of what it looks like. We really needed everyone's input to say, yeah, this is how it works. And we also wanted to figure out which parts of the narrative were landing and not landing. And so the workshops were a way to kind of iterate on that. We also showed the prototype and asked, does this work for you? What would you do with it? And all that feedback fed into the later stages of the project. This was quite risky, I would say, to do so early in the project, which is also why we had to do it, because if people were, pushed back against the initiative, we would have had to change course to take on that feedback. In this case, we didn't have to, but I think it was really important that we kind of put ourselves out there and take that risk. Third is about the status mode scale that Mael introduced. And I think this is my favorite part about this project, is not only did we model it, it was actually made part of the IT infrastructure. So it's not just common language, but it's now part of the core API that feeds all of the software that goes up on all the dashboards, both customer-facing and internal. So when we say common language, and we're talking about these 4 color scales, it's actually now part of the way that it's technically run. And that is not something that happens very often in a CX initiative, so we're very proud about that. And that they really had a mature digital organization to be able to work with us. Actually, that was someone who joined our project, was a key figure from the IT team, to be like, oh, okay, so this is what IT should do. And so that was really cool. And then I think one probably crucial component of success for this project was what's called the Ambassador Program. And so we recruited 3 change agents from the French and 3 from the UK side from all over the organization. It was an internal recruiting for people who wanted to join the project as ambassadors. And so, they were on the phone, call center one day and then joining the CX project the other, which is really exciting. And they were the ones who delivered the training to the frontline staff. And so as I mentioned, we did the train the trainer approach initially because they couldn't hire, an external consultancy to come in and run the whole thing. But in hindsight, this was really brilliant because they would learn from their own. And they already knew a lot of the people in the room and could adapt the content accordingly. People would listen, and it's really growing that capability from within. And that was really exciting, and they're now talking about making this a permanent role within the organization. Another thing that we think is pretty cool, I've not had many commercials made of apps that I've built before, but we invested quite a lot in being visible. And so not just newsletters and announcements from top management, but making physical artifacts and placed throughout the office buildings to tell people about the project. And this middle one is the newsletter where they're announcing who the ambassadors are. They really became the face of the project. It's not, well, it's definitely not us, but it's also not the project team. It's the ambassadors who are able to go out and become recognized within the field. So kind of looking at all that in hindsight, one thing we learned is really to mind the handovers. There were so many activities within the scope of our project, and it was mostly just the two of us working semi-full-time on this project, and so it would be quite easy to become distracted and be like, oh, we need to do that, we need to do that. So we had to be smart about how much to get involved in each of these new activities that would pop up. So one thing we did was just to write really good briefs and show, don't tell, make sure that people are on board with what we were trying to do and also join that effort and just be really present. And so we would be physically present in some of the trainings, for example, just to show support and also know what's going on instead of just passing it on to the next team. And so just a little bit on where are we now and what's next.
Yeah, so today, Eurotunnel has answered to all of these questions. So, who are the customer? What the customer expects? What's the experience we aim to deliver? And something about capabilities and how to deliver it. So, we know we had a call with our client last week, and we know that now customer experience is a part of every discussion at all levels of the company, from the trainings that you mentioned at the beginning of the talk to big meetings with all the managers from the company. And so we can see that there is a shift on mindset that is starting here. And actually, we think it's pretty amazing that we managed to do this in just 6 months. But of course, it's not over. And the question now is what should we do? And during this call with our client last week, he asked us to come back to think about those questions for the next part of the mission. So our main question now, how do we keep on improving? How do we operationalize this customer experience KPI? And how do we integrate those tools into the daily management of the company? So maybe we'll come back at some point to share with you what we learned from those new questions.
All right, so just to put another topic on the table, focusing on one part of the theme for why we're here, we wanted to take a step back and think about, okay, that was, the client's better future, right? But what about our better futures as enterprise designers? What did we learn from this project? Because this was a really interesting project for us. It's not every project that you get a new pair of shoes, for example. These are my security boots. And so looking back on our lived experience as we, as enterprise designers, tackle ambitious endeavors or help our clients do so, we think that we're living in these dualities because it's so complex. So one is our perception of progress. So that's Mael and me. So that's us, but also us, where we're sometimes feeling like this is amazing, we're getting somewhere, and the next day or even the next minute, we're like, are we actually getting somewhere? Why are we talking about this again? And so we kind of swing back and forth on how we think we're doing. Another is how time passes. Sometimes we're like, this is just so fast, everything is changing again. And then at the same time, we're also like, nothing is changing, and this is taking ages, what's going on? And of course, that has a direct impact on like how confident we are in being able to deliver what we're trying to do. And so on the good days, we're like, oh, of course it's like this. It's so obvious. We've got this. And then it's like 5 minutes later, it's like, I have no idea what's going on. I'm lost again. And sometimes, we would be on the same side. Sometimes it would be me on this side. So it's great to have a partner, but we are like constantly find ourselves in these dualities, and we think that knowing how to manage ourselves within that environment is critical in taking on these kinds of projects. And so I want to introduce a couple of the practices that we organically developed. It was the first time we worked together on a project, and since then we've made more systematic these things because we feel it's such an important part of how we do the work. But one is to have rituals of reflection. I'm not sure if you can see, but that's us somewhere in France on a railway station having a beer. It started just having a beer after a workshop, but we found that being able to just decompress a little bit, we would start to ask ourselves, okay, how are we doing? How's the client doing? Are we getting to where we want it to be? And that helped us kind of get into the habit of not doing like this checklist approach. So we did the workshop, we did the research, but asking ourselves, okay, what are the questions that we can now answer? Where are we right now? And that was a really practical like mindset shift, just to ask ourselves these questions. And that became part of the way that we just ran the project. So that's kind of more daily or weekly, and then that's us on the balcony a few days ago preparing our talk, and just preparing this talk made us reflect on the 6 months of the project. What did we learn? Like, how are we different now? And that's really healthy as well. Second is, so we did, of course, a lot of modeling throughout the course of this project. And what we ended up doing, because there were so many versions, is to just create copies on real-time board, now known as Miro, every time some big milestone happened in the project. And so we could look back on a specific point of time in the project and say, oh, that's what we understood then. This is what we understood now. This is what we're working with, and kind of help us keep track of progress and also see how our own understanding is developing. Third one is something that Mael mentioned very early in our project planning, because at the beginning of the project, it's like go, 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 go. If we chip away at that, we can do that. If we move this, we can also do that. And Mael's like, we're not going to sprint for 6 months. We need to plan it like a marathon. And I thought, well, I know how to plan a marathon. I've done one. But I know how to plan, how to train for a marathon. There are phases, right, in your training, where in the beginning you're working on your posture and you're building up your foundational strength, and then maybe the next phase you're working on speed. But there are phases, and they mean something different, and you stay within that phase to work on whatever it is you need to work on, and not jump ahead, because that's not how the body is built up. There are also rest days in the training. Rest is part of training, and that's something we had to keep reminding ourselves for like such an intense project. And so, yeah, that's kind of my marathon plan. That's a very early project planning. You can kind of see the similarities. Another is community as a support system. So as I mentioned in the dualities, going through projects like this can be quite emotional, and like our emotional state of being is going to impact the workshop that we run or the model that we're working on. And we were really lucky to have a lot of people around us who could support what we were trying to do in the project. So Milan, of course, was always available and happy to give us some advice. We also have many peers, and actually Sasha, who's speaking after us, was one of them, where we could, I like to call it the phone a friend option. So somebody who's not in your project but has just a very different skill set could bounce off a couple of ideas, see what they think, and use that as a way to course correct. Old buddy of mine runs an airport in Japan. It's not a train, but same but different. And in the early days when we didn't have so much expertise in working in this very operational domain, really helped just to get a different perspective very quickly. And of course, our colleagues who were always there to provide moral support and enthusiasm.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
tell the story of this bridge.
And we've been talking about bridges for 45 minutes, so we wanted to end the talk with these bridges. Maybe you heard of it, maybe you know it. It's some bridge from India. They've been built using the roots from the tree. So it takes decades to build this kind of bridge, and it can last for a century. And we really like this image because we feel it's a little bit what we are trying to do with our clients and with our network here.
So just thank you for being with us here today. We are around for the next couple of days and really try to build resistance and also evolve together with you, not just over the next 2 days, but anytime we're happy to have a conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.